Hello, and welcome to Tarot and Attachments. I'm Erin Smith, and I'm going to be doing a tarot reading to look at the archetypal themes of the week. This is the week of October 7th through the 13th. We are on the other side of the eclipse, which happened last week, and let's look and see what some of the emergent energies might have in store for us, and how we might make the most of those energies as they coalesce. So I'm going to do my thing. I'm going to go silent. I'm going to concentrate while I shuffle, and I will be with you momentarily. Okay, I'm just going to say a prayer over these cards. Hmm. Hmm. So I think this card showed up in my poll from last week as well. And this week, excuse me, it's being coupled with the Three of Swords. So these are not easy energies. In fact, thematically, the thing that comes to mind when I think of these two archetypes coming together is, what we're seeing going on in the world in multiple places. You might think of this as the hurricane that has devastated the lives of people in North Carolina and in Florida. You could think of it of what's going on in Lebanon. And so what these energies are pointing to, the Five of Wands is agitation, struggle, strife. It can often look like arguments, displays of anger or aggression, and simply just not being on the same page, that there's like conflicting energies. Wands are very much about like passion and life force energy. And um, you know, it can look like being pulled apart, being pulled in many directions at once. And it's not an easy energy. And it looks like, in terms of the Three of Swords, the Three of Swords is heartbreak, loss, grief, sadness. And specifically, there's an element here that relates to the mind. Swords are the suit of thoughts, ideas, and communication. And so the thing about the Three of Swords is that it is very hard to process your emotions when you're caught up in a mental narrative that keeps you returning to this place of emotional distress. So, here in this culture in particular, we tend to venerate the mind. We elevate thoughts above emotions. Emotions are often relegated to the realm of the feminine. And we are also a culture that tends to denigrate the feminine. So in this way, it is very common for people in this culture to consciously or unconsciously avoid experiencing their emotions, specifically emotions that are distressing, by trying to think our way out of it. Going to the mind for relief or dissociation from emotions. And emotions live in the body. They are somatic. The way that you know you're feeling something is that there is a resonant sensation that occurs in your body. And I'm certain that all of you know that, different emotions have a different quality of sensation in the body. So oftentimes people who are feeling anxious report a kind of tightening of the chest, a sort of elevated heart rate, maybe even labored breathing, again, tightening, constricting. Sometimes there's a frenetic energy that occurs in the chest or in the stomach. And it is this quality of sensation that allows you to know what emotion you're experiencing. Pleasurable sensations have a very different quality. Like when you're feeling connected to a person or an animal, you may feel like a warmth in the face, in the cheeks. You may feel a kind of like light effervescence, sort of bubbling, and maybe even a swelling in the heart. And when you're embodied, you can really sense the difference between these emotions. The other thing, when you're able to remain embodied, even in the face of intense or difficult emotions, if you can stay with it, what you notice is that they move through, they move on, that you don't get stuck in some specific state forever. It's just kind of not the way of nature. So it actually behooves us to cultivate some kind of acceptance, some kind of affect tolerance, so that we have the ability to stay with emotion long enough to watch it shift and change on its own, which is very hard when we're up in our head about it. When we are constructing narratives to try to either avoid the emotional sensations or to explain them away, right? There's this illusion that if I can just figure this out logically, then I can avoid ever having to feel this way again. But often what happens is that we concretize these stories that actually keep us stuck in the painful experience, which continues to play out in the world as conflict. And so really what is being asked of us, I mean, this is so intense, is to practice discernment with our thoughts and maybe even get good at learning to direct our mental narratives rightly in a more beneficial or at least more objective way, and to learn to be present with our emotions, to not be in battle with them and not try to avoid them. So the Queen of Swords is one who has learned to wield her sword wisely. She does not use her thoughts on herself or another, her thoughts or her words, like a weapon, right? This is the thing about sword energy. A sword has a sharp edge, and that sharp edge can be used to get to the heart of some truth, but it can also be a weapon in the form of being hypercritical, hyper-judgmental, lost in minutia or obsession, being overly analytical, that the mind on its own can be used to do either, right? To discern the truth or to undermine our ability to live rightly in the world. And so the Queen of Swords is really a direction for us, or a suggestion for us, to watch where our thoughts go, particularly when we are in the throes of some painful, difficult situation. And first, just notice what the narrative is that is arising out of that sensation, and what is it telling you. And be mindful of the languaging. Oftentimes if we are caught in a state of absolutes, you're always, it's never, that you can be certain that you're acting out of, or you're constructing a narrative around kind of a rigid analysis of the situation. Like whenever anything devolves into this kind of black and white, either or, that you can be pretty certain that you're missing some of the nuance of a situation, that you are not seeing the complexity of what's going on, and therefore maybe not in a position to assess clearly until you come into a state of emotional regulation. I mean, just biologically speaking, when we are highly activated, when our emotions have exceeded the window of tolerance, when your amygdala is engaged, your prefrontal cortex goes offline. You're not thinking clearly. You're not being rational. And so it's just really important to keep all of this in mind, to develop a kind of mindfulness about the experience that you're having, specifically in the face of like out of control circumstances. And, let's face it, like there's a lot of that in the world presently. And so, to be mindful, to watch the narrative, to ask ourselves, do I know that that's true? And is it helpful for me to believe it? And to continue to come back to a state of kind of present tense awareness until you feel kind of in tune enough with your body and calm enough to feel like you might be able to hold the complexity of a situation. And so again, the other thing that we're being asked to do while we're doing that, being mindful of the narrative and being careful not to use our thoughts and words like a weapon, is to come into a state of being connected and embodied on an emotional level. So the King of Cups is one who feels his feelings deeply without being knocked off center by them. And so, like, let's talk about what that means, right? Because oftentimes when you ask somebody, how are you feeling today? They'll tell you a story. Well, I'm feeling really stressed out because, my rent is due and I did, I'm waiting for a check to clear and it's not happening fast enough. And they're telling you the story of the circumstances, but they're not talking about the nature of that feeling tone, right? The anxiety, the anxiousness. Where does that live in your body? What is the emotional sensation that is arising out of that explanation of the story? And again, there's a kind of, I wish that we as a culture taught children this from a young age. I mean, ideally, a child learns to emotionally self-regulate through co-regulation with their caregivers, that their caregivers are able to sort of comfort and soothe them in those moments of distress so that the emotions don't become overwhelming. So the child learns that it can have emotions, even extreme emotions, but not be overwhelmed by them, to come back into a state of equilibrium. So they learn to not be afraid of their emotions. So if that didn't happen, and it didn't happen for many of us, we didn't have that experience. Instead, our emotions were not tended to in a good enough way. We were not helped through that intense emotional experience. We learn to fear our emotions. In fact, big emotions can feel life-threatening. And again, this is sort of happening on an unconscious level. And so when this is your natural state, it becomes imperative that we begin to open up to our feeling states and find inner resourcing. And maybe even if, you're dealing with overwhelming emotions that are plaguing you to a degree that it isn't manageable on your own, to seek help, to seek assistance, right? For somebody to skillfully help walk you through those feeling states so that you don't have to do it all on your own. And what this is about is building affect tolerance, of learning that you can experience intense emotions and they're not going to kill you. And they don't have to derail you. And you can begin to hold space for those emotions to be acknowledged, to be recognized, to be felt in the body. And then again, notice as they move and change and shift all on their own, so that you're not held hostage by these big feeling states. And the benefit of that, of course, is that then you don't have to shut off awareness of your emotions. So not only, do you not get to process out the pain or the conflict, but if you've shut down awareness of your emotions, you also rob yourself of the feeling of connectivity with trusted friends and loved ones. You cut yourself off from pleasurable sensations, like some basic feeling sort of safe in the world, or having a moment of pleasure or joy, because suppressing awareness of emotions bars us from having that full spectrum experience. So it is incredibly beneficial for us to practice being masterful in these two states, both cognitively and emotionally. And I say practice for a reason. You don't get to become a master at anything until you're willing to engage it on a regular basis. And that's really what kings and queens represent: mastery, maturity, being skillful, having a sense of your own personal power in the face of these two sense spaces. So finally, we have the Seven of Cups. And cups are the suit of love, emotions, intuition. And the Seven of Cups is what I refer to as emotional vagary. So being in confusion or delusion around how you feel about something. And in general, this card comes up in readings when we're afraid we're not going to get what we want or we're going to lose what we have. And so this is sort of what I was talking about, this suppression of awareness of emotions, which is usually a byproduct of being shamed for emotions, having some negative repercussion at some point in our past for identifying and expressing our feelings. It can also just be like a kind of self-protective measure. So if you're a person who's been met with a significant amount of disappointment or loss, it may feel really overwhelmingly intense or threatening to want something. That you have a desire, you have a longing for something in your life, and the fear of it not happening, not being delivered, is so overwhelming that the only way to successfully deal with that is just to distance yourself from the thing that you desire. And then you're not confronted with the possibility of disappointment. So the Seven of Cups is helping us to become aware of where we are sort of in denial or what we're distancing ourselves from because it has a significant emotional charge. And again, through creating a space where we are willing to have that emotional experience, it also brings us into this greater awareness or ability to connect with what it is that we want. What do we want to create in our lives? What kinds of people do we want to surround ourselves with? Where are our values? Are we living out of our values? Because the message of the Seven of Cups is the universe cannot conspire to bring you your heart's desire until you are willing to claim it, until you're willing to get clear about what kind of life you wish to lead. It's going to be hard to move in that direction. It's going to be hard to know if a person is sort of a good match for you, or to know if you're living your purpose in the world, if you're sort of like cloudy, if you're in this sort of self-imposed fog. So look, the overview is this: there's a lot of intensity going on right now. And it's totally understandable to sort of want to, or just to feel checked out around that. But the more that we can practice being present with the mental constructs and the emotional experience in our bodies, the more wisely we can choose who and what we wish to align ourselves with in order to make the world a little bit better. So that's kind of an intense message. I hope that that is helpful to all of you, and I wish you many, many blessings in the week ahead. Take care.